So great to see you again. And that must mean that it's time for education that transforms. My name is Magali Arthis. I'm your co-host, and it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to today's edition. Now, the title is Nourishing the Curious Mind. Are you curious yet? All right, if so, let us share this link with our family and friends so they too can enjoy this program. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe to sectv so that you can be updated on new postings. Let's sit back, relax, because Dr. Columbus Batiste and Dr. Eric Walsh have lots of information to share with us today. And of course, let us bow our heads for a word of prayer to begin.
Let us pray. Great God, you are so awesome to us, your children. We thank you so much that you love us. We thank you for the demonstration of that love through the great sacrifice of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and through his intercession for us even now. We thank you for this privilege to engage through this forum, Education that Transforms. I am confident that you have prepared your presenters, but even at this time, I ask you, dear God, just to empower them once more so that the love of Christ will be unfolded even through this presentation. I pray that the message that you want us to receive will be downloaded in our hearts, and we will be made into better people, prepared for your soon return. Bless all our students, bless our parents, our educators, the leaders in our schools and churches. We ask, dear God, that you will have your own sweet way in all of our lives and give us hope in your soon return, is my humble asking in your Son's name. Amen.
I see the work of your hands, galaxies spinning a heavenly dance. So kind, all that you are is so overwhelming. I hear the sound of your voice. All at once is a gentle and thundering noise, and all that you are is so overwhelming. I delight myself in you, captivated by your beauty. I'm overwhelmed by you. God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. I know the power of your cross, forgiven and free forever. You'll be my God, and all that you've done is so overwhelming. I delight myself in you, in the glory of your presence. I'm overwhelmed by you. God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. beautiful. Oh God, there is no one more beautiful. You are beautiful. God, you are the most beautiful. You are wonderful. You are wonderful. Oh God, there is no one more wonderful. You are wonderful. God, you are the most wonderful. You are glorious, you are glorious, oh God. There is no one more glorious, you are glorious. God, you are the most glorious. I delight myself in you, in the glory of your presence. I'm overwhelmed, I'm overwhelmed by you. God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of mercy. I'm overwhelmed, I'm overwhelmed by I'm overwhelmed by you.
Welcome again to Education That Transforms. We're so happy that you've joined us this evening. This evening we have with us two persons who are not strangers to us. They were here before with Transforming Your Fridge, Transform Your Child. And there was a follow-up with Dr. Walsh about 2 weeks afterwards. So this evening we're here to nourish the curious mind. And so we are asking for your undivided attention. We're so happy you've joined us. We ask that you will share the link so that others will be able to participate in this evening's program as well. We hope that you will enjoy the program. So good evening, gentlemen, and I will give you a chance to introduce yourselves to those who don't know you. Once again, thank you for being a part of our viewership every week at 4 p.m. We appreciate you and we enjoy your company. At this time, gentlemen, if you would please introduce yourself to those who don't know you.
I'll let Columbus go first.
Okay.
Yes. We all know the illustrious Dr. Walsh. So my name is Columbus Batiste. I'm an interventional cardiologist based in Southern California and have been fortunate enough to partner with Dr. Walsh in the creation of the Slave Food Project. So it's a project of passion. It's a project where we seek to not only to educate, but to really hopefully empower individuals to transform their lives and to really begin a groundswell movement of realizing what God has in for and purpose for us in terms of health and living a life of purpose. So pleasure to be here this evening and looking forward to a great conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why he's calling me illustrious. He's the interventional cardiologist. I'm just a lowly family medicine doc. But it's really been a pleasure working with Columbus on this. And obviously I lived in Florida for a long time and love Southeastern Conference and the work that's being done down there, especially through the education department. I get really good feedback on the programs, the schools in that conference. So, I'm a family medicine doctor, also a public health specialist. But my real passion is around the intersection of faith and health. And so, I preach the gospel a lot, but I really like it to be practical. How does our Christianity improve our health, and how does our health improve our Christianity? And this is one of the topics we're going to kind of hit tonight as we talk about where these things intersect.
Thank you so much. And of course, we have the illustrious co-host, Mrs. Magley Arthus, who has been doing a phenomenal job with Education That Transforms. And I really appreciate the support received from her and everyone else who join in every now and then to assist. So this evening, we will start off with a question. How does a person's family history affect their health?
So I think as we start in this venture, I think one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to let Dr. Walsh kind of kick us off. And I'm gonna follow up, and then I'm gonna follow up and wrap things up.
Okay, good.
All right, I was going to let him go first, but this is actually a very interesting, very important question. As physicians, one of the things you're trained to do is to take a history of the patient. Part of that is, there's a social history, sexual history, even a spiritual history. You can be trained to take, like in Loma Linda, we talk about that. But then the family history is one of the ones that is seen as like critical. There's this assumption that really, if you come from two parents that had hypertension, diabetes, and high cholesterol, basically it's inevitable that you're going to have them. A lot of questions you ask, and Dr. Batiste can pinpoint this, but we often ask, like, did you have any male in your family that had a heart attack before? I would say before the age of 60, or do you have a woman in your family that had a heart attack before the age of 65 or whatever? I'm sure the numbers change, but I always ask it kind of age specific. Because again, we assume that if someone had a heart attack in your family early, you're probably gonna have a heart attack, especially if it was one of your parents or a first level relative, like a brother or sister. But what we know is that a lot of what we assume is genetics is actually lifestyle. It isn't that your family has the same genes as much as they have the same menu, the same recipes, the same eating habits and television watching habits and all of those different types of things. So, when we talk about family history, it's relevant because there probably is some increased risk, but it's not, maybe as we learn more and more, it's probably not as much because of your genes as it is your lifestyle. And one of the things we always say is, your DNA loads the gun, but your lifestyle is actually what pulls the trigger. So I'll let Dr. Batiste jump in. He has a lot on this as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, well said. And the thing is that oftentimes we're looking for some question of, this is our destiny. And I think one thing that science has really shown us is that our understanding of the way in which disease transmission occurs is really evolving, right? We're learning more and more about it. And so there was a wonderful article that came out of one of our major publications called New England Journal of Medicine. And several years ago, what they did was they described really individuals at a heightened sense of genetic risk for cardiovascular events, using that as an example. And what they found, though, is that the biggest impact on whether or not they manifest disease was not their DNA, but it was their lifestyle. And that lifestyle was hugely impactful. And so this isn't even the extremes of lifestyle. This is just about slowly adopting a more favorable lifestyle, what American Heart Association calls the simple seven. Moving around, control the blood pressure, control of weight, and eating more healthful foods. And what they found is that people did better. Now, what's most interesting about this whole paradigm is something called epigenetics. And I love this thing called epigenetics because, we always think of in binary. Either you are or you aren't. Either you're saved or you're not. Either you're evil or you're good. Either whatever. Very binary terminology is what we tend to use. And what this concept of epigenetics, and so are you ladies familiar with epigenetics? A little bit?
Yes.
And so the story behind it, for those of you listening who don't know, is that there was a scientist. And so these scientists, when they're there, they were playing around with these mice. And I hate mice. I hate rodents. They're playing around with these mice, but these were very specific mice called agouti mice. And these agouti mice are naturally yellow, bright yellow. They're naturally obese. They're naturally inclined to have chronic diseases of diabetes, cancers, etc. And so they start playing around with the food of these agouti mice. And they start giving them these, what they characterize as methyl donors. Now, in simplistic terms, these are plant-rich foods, greens and onions and things of that nature. They start giving them that would donate folate and so forth, and folic acid. And what they found is that the offspring all of a sudden gave rise to skinny brown mice who were not inclined to have these chronic diseases. And this was the birthplace of what we now call epigenetics, that our lifestyle, our mindset, our interactions all play a role in our DNA, but not just of ourselves, but they're transmitted to our offspring. So when we ask the question, so Dr. Walsh kind of said it tongue in cheek, that oftentimes is not our DNA, right? It's not in our DNA, it's our cookbooks that lead to an issue. He's absolutely right, because we pass on these habits, these poor habits. We pass on these modeling, this assimilation that our children take on from us and take on from the grandparents, et cetera, that lead to poor health outcomes. And that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to shape and bring attention to, is this awareness of the fact that, yes, indeed, your actions do matter. Yes, indeed, the things that you convey to your kids do matter in terms of their long-term health.
And let me jump in before we go any further and say, this is also a very spiritual concept. In the 10 Commandments, embedded is a very interesting statement. It says, the sins of the father shall visit the children, even to the third and the fourth generation. And God will show favor on those who love him to the third and the fourth generation. So what one generation does impacts the other generations. That's epigenetics in a great sense, because if you develop poor habits, and you will express these genes. For African Americans and Afro Caribbeans, you have to understand that the years of persecution and abuse that was had either under the colonial master in the islands or under the slave master here in the United States, even that has been passed down. And it's something that now the country's starting to come to grips with, that you can't really ignore all of that trauma. Because again, it's not that it's family history, per se, but this is something that was put on you, and certain genes were expressed in order to try and improve survival. And some of those genes now cause us problems with trying to stay healthy.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. So the follow-up question would be, can this cycle, this family history cycle, be broken? And if so, how?
Columbus, you can take this one.
Jumping in, yes. So the answer is clearly yes, and that's what we started leading into this. I think the latter part of your question is the most important one. How? And that how really begins the process of the deep exploration. And this is touching where Dr. Walsh does regularly, as opposed to myself. But really, it starts with a deep-seated keystone habit that I call faith. Right? It's faith and it's trust in God. That's one at the central component of how any of us can make change. The scripture talks about the things I want to do, I don't do. And we end up doing the things we don't want to do, and the things we don't want to do is the problem. It's we go back and forth. And so we have to be committed. And the only way that we can get there is through establishing a relationship with Christ and having a foundation. And as you begin to tackle these keystone habits, that's the foundation, building that house upon the rock. Once we do that, now everything else becomes incremental. It doesn't mean that you're going to have overnight success, but you're going to have to continue to layer upon it and have a conscientious, planned approach. So when we talk about how someone makes a transformation, we don't just talk about eating food. Food is the last thing you have to worry about. You have to really take on the mindset, I would say, of being selfish. Right. And so when we talk about being selfish, I don't mean it in the traditional fashion, as I tell my kids, don't be selfish, share with your brother, share with your sister. I talk about being selfish, really about that foundation spiritually, as we just mentioned too. We talk about being selfish. The E stands for being active, exercising, right? Not in terms of doing CrossFit or sitting out there running back and forth, but just simply getting neat with it. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, when you're standing and cooking. When you as teachers are walking back and forth, you're actually being active. That's exercise, right? Those are things that you do. If you're a kid and you're playing a video game, well, do the one that you have to get up and emulate moving around movement. Go outside and do it even better. The L stands for love, choosing love over hate, right? That's a huge component of what's as an extension of love: forgiveness, gratitude. These are all extensions of love. The F stands for food. Yes, the central component is real food. Food that's not made in a plant, but is made of plants, is what you have to really adhere to. The I stands for intimacy, not inside of a male, female, or a sexual fashion, but more in terms of a relationship. The way that David loved Jonathan, the relationships that you have that you can rely upon someone, whether or not it's a child, an animal. We talk about these animals. My mom has an animal, a little dog. He knows when she's sad, when she's missing my dad who passed away. That dog, she knows when my mom is hurting because of her back. That's an intimate relationship. Sleep, they ask for sleep. We don't get sleep. And as a result of sleep, that happens in terms of our academic achievements, our desires for work, or desires for family. All these things become impacted. And the H stands for humor. We're finding reasons to have joy, the joy of life, right? These are all the components that we have to look at when we're building to make a change. How you make these changes and break the habits that have been around you, you have to get back to the basics and to the foundation in order for you to achieve success. And that starts with Christ.
That was quite powerful. Thank you so much for explaining that to us today. We often are told that the African American community has a high risk of cholesterol. How can you educate us on that fact or myth behind the statement, and what can we do starting today to change that?
I'll jump in and just say, I think most Americans have a problem with cholesterol. That's not even unique to African Americans. There's a documentary on Netflix right now I haven't seen that talks about the impact that Black American cuisine has had on the rest of the American cuisine. And for that reason alone, when you look at foods that are basically very heavy in animal products, so milk, cheese, meats, butter, that's where you get cholesterol from. Cholesterol comes from a liver. Fish has a liver. So there are fish that have more cholesterol than a pig does when you eat fish. So some people think, oh, I eat fish, it's healthy. Some fish actually has more cholesterol than pork. So the truth about cholesterol, I mean, African Americans may average higher cholesterol. I don't know, maybe Dr. Batiste knows that. What does matter is you can fix it pretty easily. If you do not have a familial hypercholesterolemia, where your liver just makes too much cholesterol, you don't need to eat it. And if you just cut the cholesterol out of your diet by removing animal products, the cholesterol will go down. And one of the studies, Dr. Batiste will remember, one of the studies actually shows that over a certain cholesterol level, under a certain cholesterol level, you don't see heart attacks anymore. There's just not enough cholesterol. So getting your cholesterol, I always tell patients, you want your cholesterol under 135. If you can get your cholesterol under 135, you're doing well. And a lot of them come in, their cholesterol is 280, which is super high. And they've got a long way to bring it down, but it can be brought down. The medications, they say, work, but what the study shows that a whole food plant-based diet is actually more effective than cholesterol medication.
Absolutely. When we look at the impact of cholesterol, and we're looking specifically at cardiovascular disease and events, really we're talking about inflammation. We're talking about a whole thing of cardiometabolic syndrome that begins in terms of this inflammation, this increased blood sugar that's damaging the lining of the vessels. And I always describe the lining of the vessels just like an old Teflon pan, right? Many of us have cooked on those Teflon pans, nothing sticks to it, right? We go on there, you may pop whatever on there, nothing's gonna stick to it. But the problem is we've all seen those Teflon pans that get worn down. And now you have to add a little bit of grease, a little bit of butter, a little bit of whatever it is, because everything's going to begin to stick to it. That's like your vessels inside of your body. They're beautifully and wonderfully made. So the inner portion of it's like a Teflon pan. When you're born, nothing sticks to it. But eventually, over the wear and tear of life, of the foods we eat, the free radicals that are there bombarded, it begins to degrade it. And now things begin to stick to it. And one of the biggest culprits is the cholesterol. So the values in the African Americans, remarkably, are not higher than those of Caucasians. But what we do find is that the rates of cardiovascular events, strokes, and heart attacks, and more importantly, death from these things is much higher in the African American community and those of African descent, I should recharacterize, with living within the United States. And so there's a huge problem as we look at this impact. And so Dr. Walsh is absolutely right. So some epidemiologic studies show that individuals who have cholesterol levels lower than 150, really there is no signs of significant coronary artery disease inside those individuals. And so, yes, likewise, what's our best way of taking care of that? Well, we always tell people, yeah, just take these pills, the statins, because they lower the inflammatory process. They help to stabilize that lining of the vessel, and they lower your numbers. But here's a remarkable thing. Studies have shown that people coming in with heart attacks, they may have what we characterize as normal cholesterol levels on these statins. It tells us it's deeper than just the medications. The medications are not the cure. We haven't taken care of the problem. So many of us walk around with this concept, this perception that the doc gave me the pills, I must be okay. A little bit won't hurt me. But in contrast, using that same analogy of that nonstick pan, what happens from one meal that you have in celebration of your graduation, that one meal you have in celebration of that birthday, that anniversary, that wedding, that all of a sudden your blood, which is briskly flowing through your vessels, begins to turn to sludge. And now it's coursing through slowly, as now the vessels begin to constrict and they hone down as a result of this high fatty meal that we're having in celebration. And in that moment, you start to wonder, is this really heartburn, or is it my heart truly hurting? And so what we know is that the body is beautifully and wonderfully made. And so your body can heal and adapt to it. But what do we do on a repeated basis? We start with breakfast, then we turn to snack, and then lunch, and then dinner, all with the same characteristic foods that Dr. Walsh talked about, rich in fats, especially the animal protein, as well as the fats that are there. And then we fry. And we say, well, I'm having fish. Well, it's not even fish that's described inside the Mediterranean diet, Lyon trial. We're eating fried fish, battered in cornmeal with extra salt, hush puppies, and eating hot sauce on it. And that's cold. The tartar sauce, that's right, right? We're doing that, or potato salad, whatever it is. And we're saying, I'm eating healthy, I'm having fish. Now, come on, stop it. Right? And so we know that we have to focus on eating more health promoting foods that's going to clean our digestive tract and lower our cholesterol burden. And that's through fiber rich foods. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans are going to be the things that will help lower the cholesterol.
And let me throw in one kind of caveat in this, and that's stress. The study showed that if you are stressed, you actually generate more atherosclerotic plaques on the exact same diet as someone who is not stressed. Here's where it gets very strange. And if you've listened to our slave food conversations, we come back to this all the time. If you're stressed, it also can drive you to eat some of the foods that will drive up your cholesterol. It becomes like a cyclical. So Dr. Batiste referenced Romans chapter 7 earlier, where Paul says, you know, that the good I would I do not, and that which I would not that I do. Paul then says, "O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death?" Why is our body like death? Because literally we create flywheel loops of bad habits, so that one bad habit feeds the other bad habit, and really causes us to get into where we're in like a disease trap. And I want folk to understand that that's what has to be broken. And it goes back to something Dr. Batiste said earlier. This is where faith comes in. This is where faith comes in. Dr. James Kyle, one of my favorite physician-doctor combinations, at a health and temperance day in Rubidoux Church, way back before we had a big church at Rubidoux, said something in our health and temperance sermon. He said, "Your body will conspire to kill you." He said, if you give your body everything it wants, your body will conspire to kill you. And many of us realize that that is absolutely true. And so it goes back, so cholesterol is just one indicator. I mean, we could go to blood pressure, we can go to hemoglobin A1C or fasting blood sugars, C-reactive protein. There's so many things we could test. What is underlying is exactly what Dr. Batiste said. What we do and how we eat impacts all of those different things. And it is the gestalt of these things that actually cause disease. What modern medicine likes to do is to pull out one ingredient out of a plant. If they can turn it into a pill and patent it, they'll sell it to you. They also like to pull out one aspect of health, like cholesterol or blood pressure or whatever, create a lab test for it. That's expensive. Then create the drugs to treat it that are also expensive. But what we know is that if you do things the way God said do it, all of those numbers come down collectively and your health improves overall, which is what God is really after for us.
I just like to, I ate a fish this evening. So So, but anyhow,
I will put down my police badge. I promise. My food. I'm the food police. I know people always feel like they either have to give their confessional to me or not. But I'm a flip it on you, right? Instead of you focusing on what you ate that may have been less ideal for you, what did you eat that was good for you? So there's power in focusing on the positive too, as well, as opposed to just the negative. You think even within the church, oftentimes, even as a kid, I remember we don't do this, we don't do that, we don't do this, we don't do that. What do we do? Right? And so it's the same concept we have to bring in terms of our health. What did I do for my health today? What did I do to invest in me today? Did I eat any fruits or vegetables at all? Did I walk? Did I drink some water? Did I get some sleep? Maybe I try to go to bed 15 minutes earlier. And so focusing on the positivity, because in all honesty, those listening out there, they may feel a bit overwhelmed just already at this point by what we're saying. Well, what can I do? I can't do anything. And I don't want you to leave with that, because we know that any step in the right direction is a step towards a better you, right? That's really the goal. And so if I'm comparing you having fish compared to having a hamburger, that's phenomenal. I'm in love with the fact that of the progress that you're making, right? If you have fish instead of maybe having some curry goat, or instead of having a fried chicken, right? You're actually, I love the progress of what you're making. And as you sit there and you say, okay, you know what? Yeah, I had some veggies with it. I had some this, or I had salad. That's good. So that I just wanted to interject that for those who may be listening and hearing. I don't want you to feel that we're beating up on you or about the foods that you love.
I feel a lot better.
Thank you, Dr. Batiste. So the next question shifts gears a bit. We know that now, I remember giving my students a project to do, and they were making a budget, and internet, household, utilities and bills. And then he said, oh, we don't pay for cable anymore, we just stream. So everyone is streaming, whether it's Disney Plus, Hulu, the works. So we've become a binge watching society, right? Especially since the COVID closures. Can you help us understand how this is impacting our mental and physical health?
Go ahead, Columbus.
Look at that. He wants to throw me out there like that. No. So listen, this is powerful. When we look, because what you're touching on is in multiple aspects. You're touching on the impact of social media on our kids. You're looking at the impact of instantaneous gratification, right? That's what binge watching really is. No longer the days where I had to wait and wade through the television commercials. I have 5 channels to watch and I'm wading through commercials. Forgive it. Maybe I can tape, but I can't just sit and scroll through, fast forward through everything and watch the whole entire season in one night. So now we're talking about really, what is the importance of delayed gratification? What is the impact of delayed gratification on our mindset, this dopaminergic surge, the neurohormonal transmission, and the future of our kids? We can go back to the marshmallow study years and years and years ago, right? You guys are familiar with that?
No.
What they did is they sat these kindergartners down. And what they did was they said, okay, we can give you a marshmallow if you can wait for an hour or whatever it was, whatever the time period was, and not touch it, we'll give you 2 or we'll give you 5. And to see which kids were more inclined towards delayed gratification, were able to delay their gratification, and what impact that had in the future. And what they found was the kids who were able to do that were able to really achieve great things in life, right? In terms of it. And so trying to say, how can we really hone delayed gratification? Well, this is going the opposite direction. What we're doing is we're actually saying, you don't have to wait. You can have whatever you want right now in one sum. We can get that stimulation from TV, from media, the same as we can do when we turn towards foods, right? And so in terms of what Doug Lyle describes as the pleasure trap. And there's this whole thing of saying, I'm looking to avoid pain. I want to seek pleasure and with the least amount of energy possible. And if you think about that, This is everything that fits in this pleasure trap. It's very much what we're talking about. I want entertainment. I want it now. I want it at my fingertips. I don't want to use any energy at all and no pain. So click, press, go. I want food that's going to give me a high because I'm stressed. That's high in sugar and salt that will stimulate me with least amount of energy. I don't have to go and sit and bake and combine all these ingredients to make myself cookies or a cake or an energy ball made of dates and peanut butter or whatever else for those who are healthier out there, right? I can go and have this immediate right now and forget going out to get it. I can order Uber. I'm not Uber, the DoorDash or whatever, the quick turnaround. And yes, that's right. And have it delivered to me instantaneously, right? And so now we're in this society, this state in which now our attention span is narrowed. Our ability to comprehend is altered. And now we've thrown off this reward pathway that's there. And what impact does that have on us? Well, you think, well, it's only going to be beneficial to us. Well, not at all. What studies have shown is that although kids may be able to seek and face, and these social media groups may provide value, they also lead to depression in our kids, anxiety in our kids, and increasing amounts that we're seeing more and more of these diagnoses come out over the past years. We're seeing this during the COVID time and others. So that's just like an initial kind of thought. This is a conversation by itself, in all honesty, with this question. This is a loaded question in terms of its impact on us as adults and on our community at large, as for our youth as well.
And let me jump in. I just did a week of prayer for Guam virtually on the mind. So every night at different things. And this is one of the nights I did something on social media and of course on entertainment. I've been doing stuff on entertainment for a long time. Television actually causes some major problems. And so when we were growing up, television was the greatest threat, honestly. All of a sudden, starting in the 1950s, someone could pipe into your house without ever opening your front door, images, thoughts, belief patterns, ideologies that were completely contrary to your family or to your faith system. What we have now is that on steroids when you look at social media. It's designed so that you scroll up because there's never a bottom. So you want to reach a bottom, so you just keep scrolling. So the kids are trapped. You can't even fast forward a TikTok video, right? You have to, if you want to go back, you got to scroll down to the next video, then back up and it starts over. All of that is a way to trap you into wanting to see more and more and more. What we know is that when you're watching television or streaming these videos, it literally moves your brain from the highest level brainwave function, which is your most alert form, down to where you're in like a semi-comatose state. What does that mean? That means that the frontal lobe of your brain, that is your reasoning center, is no longer able to differentiate and determine what is real, what is not real, what is good, what is bad. And so you can force feed into, especially into a child's mind, moral beliefs that they otherwise would never have. So for example, most Hollywood movies finish with violence. Death and killing is how you solve the problem. There's no coincidence in the rise in violence in our society because of that. We talk a lot about food and health. We talk a lot about advertising and the power of advertising. And the studies that show if you show a kid commercials that have high calorie, fatty foods in it, the child is actually more likely to consume more calories that day. It's pretty deep. These commercials actually work that good. But what's most frightening to me about, and I'm gonna go back to social media now, especially after something that happened in our family, is that social media also can push kids, as Dr. Batiste said, to depression, anxiety, and even suicide. We've seen cases across the country where being bullied online, bullied in social media, wanting to fit in, not being able to, has literally led kids to this point. Probably most frightening is that it may also lead to that child having problems with attention, with paying attention. So when they go to see you, Dr. Davis or Mrs. Artis in the clinic or in the classroom, guess what happened? You don't light up, you don't scroll up and down, you don't have bells and whistles, you just stand there. So that kid that's what they're doing all the time, How do we expect them in a real world to be able to focus when what they've been doing is television frames change? I think it's like every 8 seconds, 7 seconds, something like that. You don't change for 45 minutes. And you expect that child to be able to focus, but they've been trained to not focus. That is the danger of these things. And again, when it comes back to health, makes it easy to not exercise, makes it easy to just eat, because now your brain you're not even registering hunger and stuff, because your brain is basically turned off. It's in like idle, like your engine's idling rather than revving and being focused.
So you may be the one that I learned about, maybe it was some seminar we were doing with the young kids, and you talk about TV because your brain is in fun mode when you're watching TV. And that even if you're watching a program, a religious program, if they say turn to the Bible text, whatever it is, you really should go get your Bible, turn to that text and read along. I'm almost sure you were the one who was telling us that a couple of years ago. And I'll always remember that. So social media.
Listen, when I was a kid, Friday night worship, my mother read us Bible stories out loud, right? She would read and we'd sit. That means in my mind, I had to see Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rachel, Leah. I had to see the farm, the sheep, the goat. I had to see the angel grab Lot's hand and pull him out. I had to see it. And that creates imagination. It creates brain power. Nowadays, there's no exercise of the brain. Everything you need is just force fed to you, and that is the danger of this. And also, there's some who say, an hour of TV a day on average is okay. The average African American child, the last time I looked at the statistics, watches 8 hours of television a day. 8 hours. That's a full-time job. That is a dangerous thing, and it correlates with how well we do in school. So people get angry at Asian kids for doing well in school. They watch the least amount of television on average. They're busy playing the cello and learning all these different things, while our kids are watching TV and playing video games. And then you can't get upset that their children do better in school. It's not right to get upset that their kids do better in school.
That's true.
One of the interesting things, we had a guest on our last slave food conversation, and a couple of neurologists, and they really kind of went in depth into kind of describing what happens when you begin to do these multi-sensory actions. That when you're playing an instrument, musical instrument, how you're stimulating not only the auditory from the music, you're actually reading too as well. Then you have the motor skills, the dexterity. So you're taking into all aspects of the brain. And so as you do these varying activities, it's so important for the dexterity, for the mind, for the growth and development, which is power, as Dr. Walsh is kind of saying, and that manifests really in terms of why learning may be better in kids who listen to music or who play musical instruments and so forth. And so having these skills, and the same could go from cooking, right? You look at the power of the mind for remembering the recipes, for smell, for the motor dexterity, all these things, the memories that are formed too as well, based off of all of these experiences. It's multi-layered that we diminish when we decide we're just going to go out and we purchase something inside of a package and we eat it without even any thought. And so what we're doing is we're negating aspects that are part of our human nature, and that lead to our development and make us who we are as human beings.
Thank you for sharing that. The next question I have, I'm not even sure if I should be the one asking, but let me go ahead. What about sleep patterns? Having been home for so long, many people feel that they can sleep late and then sleep in to make up the difference. Why is sleep important, and how do we maximize
it? There's a lot on sleep. My Jamaican grandfather used to say, early to bed, early to
rise, make a man healthy,
strong, wealthy, and wise. So there's something to that. In the spirit of prophecy, I know what actually talks about the fact that the sleep you get before midnight is the most valuable sleep. And I saw some study recently that kind of supports that idea, that going to bed, going to bed after midnight and getting 8 hours of sleep is not as valuable as if you get the same 8 hours of sleep and you start at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Sleep is when the body's immune system does its most important work. It fights cancer and infections while you sleep. Sleep is when all the information you've taken during the day is filed away so that you can recall it later on. Those children, many of the children that you guys have who have trouble learning, if you were to go back and look, they have trouble sleeping. They either are sleeping in bad conditions, loud houses, or they're drinking caffeine and not getting quality sleep. But sleep is critical to learning as well. But one other thing is that sleep is also critical to appetite control. The study showed that if you don't sleep well at night, you eat more calories the next day.
Yeah, sleep is extremely powerful. It really truly is in terms of like the layering, and there's scientists and researchers who get really in depth into describing what Dr. Walsh just broke down in terms of the time of the night when you either shorten your sleep, you go to bed late, or you wake up really early, how it can really impact the sleep and the imprinting on your brain, the cleaning up of things that you don't really need. And we've all gone to sleep after a good night, gone to bed with a good night's sleep, and we wake up and all of a sudden we have the answer to things. We've all gone to sleep and said, I need to wake up at 5 a.m., but somehow, some way, we wake up at 4:55. All of a sudden we're up and awake right before our alarm clock goes off. Our brain is powerful. Our brain is powerful in terms of what God has given us and our ability. And so part of the reason, oftentimes I've heard researchers and read studies where people will anecdotally say, oh, we'd only use a small portion of our brain. If we only use more of it, then we could have infinite capacity. Well, no, we need to focus. And this dovetails back to the issue you brought up before about binge watching, about social media, is that it loses our ability to focus. Focus. We're not inherently built on multitasking. We're built to focus. And that focus is extremely important for our memory right now, but also towards our potential memory and our impact in the future for developing dementias and various Alzheimer's, other aspects like that. So there's so many layers as it relates to why sleep is so incrementally important: blood pressure, diabetes. And I'll leave you last with this. What happens is that when you don't get sleep, you're essentially creating a stressful state in your body. That's why there's an association with the elevated blood pressure. That's why we find heart attacks from the cortisol rise that happen early in the morning and things of that nature. So we really have to really do the best we can with sleep. And that isn't always easy. It's easier said than done. So what I encourage people, once again, small habits, atomic changes is what I encourage. Go to bed 15 minutes earlier, rest, take time, shut down from technology, turn off the blue lights, make sure you have good covers over the windows, right? Make the bedroom an area of solace, of something that's not just filled with raucous, if you can help it, from your living circumstances, not watching TV to the moment that you lay in bed, not on the phone. Turning those lights off because it can disrupt the hormonal transmission in the body too as well. And so once you begin the process of doing this, and so I'll do 15 minutes for 3 months. Okay, now I'm gonna back that back to another 15 minutes. That's a half hour, another 15 minutes. So maybe by the end of the year, you're sleeping an hour more than what you were sleeping a year ago, right? You can't make up that sleep, like what was suggested in the question. You can't make it up that it's all of a sudden going to heal the damage that's been done. So we have to look at this third of our lives, right? This is a third of our life. If you break it down into 8, 8, and 8, that we spend subconscious, and we think because it's subconscious means it's not important. It's extremely important.
Thanks for that.
Wow. Thank you for that. You sort of touched on stress, which leads into the next question that we have. Nutrition, stress, and anxiety. How do these three work together? Can you put it in, and as you're answering, can you also put it into context for our graduates who may be listening to today's program?
So this one I am definitely going to punt to Dr. Walsh to start first. I flipped and then I got the coin toss, so he's going first on this one.
Well, nutrition, stress, and anxiety. So one of the things we've been talking about is you've heard us mention a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is the primary stress hormone. So it triggers you to go into a state of what we call like fight or flight. You've all heard that. which is also largely adrenaline mediated. So if you feel like you are overwhelmed, and the equation that we use for this is stress equals demands minus resources, right? So if you have too much demand on your life without enough resources, so if you're a rich person, it's easy to get resources. So if one parent in Compton and one parent in Beverly Hills, and each child gets pulled over and they're found to be driving under the influence, which set of parents is going to be more stressed? Well, the parent that can't afford a lawyer.
That's right.
The parent that can't afford a lawyer, the parent whose child is probably going to have more trouble in the criminal justice system, the parent who has no friends that are judges or politicians are going to be far more stressed than those parents. They're both going to be stressed. There's the parent that has a lawyer on retainer. They know the judges. They contribute to the mayor's campaign, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to call in favors for their child. They're going to be able to afford to get the child into rehab so that the judge will say, you know what, you don't need to go to jail. You can go to rehab. Resources, and this is a big picture example. Resources allow you to buffer the demands of life. The less resources you have, the more difficult that is. Now, in a country like Jamaica, all of this stress exists. People buffer through social cohesion, faith, and these types of things, and a collective understanding that we've got to work together because collectively we have less. In the United States, people are a lot more selfish. We're much more individualistic. So here, even though the poverty may not be as extreme as in other parts of the world, we bear a greater burden from it. And then when you layer that with the legacy and history of racism and prejudice in the country and other things, you start to see how people can just inherently carry around a lot of stress. This is called allostatic load. It means that you are carrying a burden of stress that your body can't handle. It's the equivalent of literally being chased by a dog all the time, right? Or being, that makes your whole fight or flight response happen. If you live in that constantly, it causes disease all by itself. People say to me, well, why do some vegetarian, they've been vegetarian all this life and they died of this stress? Mm-hmm. Ask yourself, what stressors did they have in their life? The stress all by itself can cause disease. And if it's insurmountable stress, or at least the perception of insurmountable stress, it definitely can. This leads to anxiety, right? Chronic stress, chronic high levels of adrenaline. You start getting panic attacks. You think about the stressor. You get all worried and messed up. To this day, if a police officer pull up behind me, I'm not gonna lie, I get a little bit of stress. I get like that little rush of stress because I know what I've experienced in the past. So all of those things work together. So how does that then trigger into nutrition? I'm gonna have Dr. Batiste jump in here in a second, but we know that again, when you're super stressed out, comfort foods taste a whole lot better. Stress equals desserts spelled backwards. Stress is dessert spelled backwards. We say that in our talks. But you've got to eat food that also buffers the stress, like helps you to manage and handle the stress. It all goes together. For your graduating seniors, one of the things I have to say is when you go into the real world, it continues to be, and maybe even is more important, that you live a life that battles stress. And I'll finish with this before Dr. Batiste jumps in. The Adventist lifestyle, from its prayer life to its faith life, to the fellowship at church, to the serving of others, to our diet, all and our emphasis on education, all of these things work together to lower stress. Literally, it's a stress reducing lifestyle when you're a Seventh-day Adventist.
Absolutely. One of the things I'll just add, because it was well said already, is that we also know that when individuals get stressed, that they have a tendency to really make poor choices. Right. So when you layer on the lack of sleep, you layer on these perpetual stresses that are there. There's studies that have shown. There was one unique study that was done, small study out of Stanford with this professor, Baba Shiv. And what he did was he took two groups of individuals who were both intentionally making favorable lifestyle changes. And to one group, he gave a series of digits, let's say somewhere around 10 or 12. And we know the average memory is around 7 digits, which is why your telephone numbers or license plates are all around that. Right. And so what ended up happening was that he gave one group just 2 digits to learn. The other group, he gave the multiple digits. And coming out, they had to go in front of a group to recite this. And they were offered fruit or chocolate cake. But intentionally, they were purposeful not to eat chocolate cake, but they all chose it who are more stressed. And it was a reflection of a small microcosm that's been demonstrated in multiple other studies about the layers of stress in our food, our choices, on top of the fact that, as Dr. Walsh mentioned, we somehow seems to, it absorbs. We also find that people, as a result of stress, they have increased abdominal weight, that they have visceral organ fat, that they're more inclined to have disease burden that's there. And so there's an interplay between our nutrition and between our stress. And we also characterize in our study as nutritional stress. It's, of course, eating disease-forming foods, but it's also not eating health-promoting foods. And so when we look at this paradigm of what exactly is nutritional stress, we see this bombardment of oxidative stress, like the rusting of the cars and so forth that happens in the winter times. And so we see the same thing take effect inside the vessels and in the body. We see something called the advanced glycation end products, which is like the browning effect when you're making that toast or you're making that gravy or you're putting those grill marks on your meat, right? Or on the grill coming out of Memorial Day or anything else. Those things, same things happen inside your body from this interplay between sugars and protein is what we see, that this stressful effect that occurs that's predictive of disease states. We see in some smaller states have shown that surges in the salivary cortisol levels. That cortisol is the stress hormone that rises when we have animal protein compared to plant-rich protein. So we see that that stress, yes, indeed, is tied to our health. And so we also say that our health equals resiliency divided by stress. And everything we do is either adding to our resiliency or it's adding to our stress. So yes, indeed, our nutrition can add to our resiliency. And our nutrition can add most indefinitely to our stress level through nutritional stress that can lead to our poor health outcomes.
Wow. So if I have this thing called nutrition down pat, if I'm a plant-based eating person, water drinking and all that, do I still need to exercise?
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question. You have a car, right?
Yes.
All right, that car is shiny. You guys shined up. You have the gas inside of that car. You put the perfect oil in that car. What happens to that car if you leave it parked? You say, Columbus, I want you to wash this car. I'm flying across the country, and you just sit on the car there for a month or 2 months. What's going to happen to that car? Is it going to run as well? It's not. The battery may not turn on. The tires may turn flat. If you don't take that car out for a spin and drive it around, move it, it's going to fail you. And so the body is beautifully and wonderfully made, but we have to engage it in all aspects. The pillars of health, as I kind of described before, in terms of our mindset, right? That leads to stress, our exercise, our activity, how we choose to love or to hate. Do we feed our bodies constantly with this information that is just making us stressed out? Watching these news stations 24/7 and wondering what's going to happen next around the corner. Mm-hmm. That on top, separate from the food that we isolate. Coming out of COVID, what happened? We tried to encourage folks about physical distancing, but there was social isolation. People were socially isolated. That means they were disconnected from loved ones. That means that they were lacking intimate relationships, that we are social creatures. We were created, to come together. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together, we are meant to be together. And so that's problematic. And as a result of that, we know your susceptibility to disease goes up inside these situations like that. So there is way more than just the food component. Life is greater than just the food. Food is a central component in terms of how we feed our bodies, but it's not to negate the importance of our spiritual life. It's not to negate the importance of exercise, of moving. And I don't mean, once again, Taibo or Jane Fonda aerobics or Richard Simmons aerobics or none of that business like that, or CrossFit. I mean simply just walking. I mean simply just choosing to stand rather than sit. Those are simple tools that you can do that. I'm going to choose to park further away. I'll take the stairs up. And you say, well, Doc, I can't go up 4 flights of stairs. Take it up 1 flight. then take the elevator the rest of the way. But be intentional in your efforts. Use that smartphone to track your steps. Use that wearable to track your steps, and you can prove, am I active or am I not? And there's power behind it. I'll leave you last with this. It's so powerful that many docs don't even tell their patients about how powerful just simply walking is. So for those of you out there who may be diabetic, that simply walking 10 minutes after you eat can reduce your blood sugar and help improve your numbers. A simple tool. All you have to do is get up and walk. It could be in place. It could be around the living room. It can be back and forth, whatever you choose to do. Outdoors is much better. Get that vitamin D and fresh air at the same time if you can, if it's safe and your climate can accommodate that. But yes, you do have to move.
Thank you.
Thank you for the examples too, the powerful, wow, thank you. So let me ask you this.
Wait, I think Dr. Walsh was
Oh,
jumping.
sorry, go
So
ahead.
emphasize, we talked a lot about stress. We don't want to underestimate as well that when you walk, something simple as walking, you actually release endorphins. You've heard of the runner's high? Endorphins are natural pain medicines, painkillers, I'll call it, in your own brain that actually work as you walk. And if you ever go for a nice long walk, when I did the Lopers at Loma Linda, we were training to run a marathon, they would say that the first mile was miserable, but that second, third mile, something just happened. You just felt better. That's part of what exercise does for you. It's a natural way to reduce your stress levels. They say that food is the most overused anti-anxiety medicine, and exercise is the most underused anti-anxiety medicine.
Thank you. So here's the next question then. As we're talking about eating right, living right, exercising well, can we make this practical now for our graduates? As we were sharing with you earlier, today's program afterwards includes a graduation for our Southeastern Conference graduates. So for those that are tuning in right now, can you make this practical for them? How can they live better, eat better, study better? Those of them that are already in college, so for the next semester or quarter, and those of them that are graduating from high school or even graduating from college and heading out into the real world. How can this apply to their lives?
Yeah, I'll jump in and then turn it over to Dr. Walsh. And so first, congratulations to the graduates out there. It's a wonderful accomplishment. I mean, savor it. Take a few moments and be thankful to your family that supported you, God who's blessed you to achieve this, and take a few moments and then move on. And here's part of the reason why I say that. My practical advice is to plan. I want you to treat your body and your future like a business. You have to plan, you need to invest, and you have to execute, right? You have to invest in that. And so whether or not going in, so just for instance, and you're young and you may not perceive this right now, but there's going to come a point in time where you're going to want to retire. And so what every business person is going to tell you is that you need to invest some money and take money out your paycheck right now to put towards your retirement. They're not saying take 50%. God doesn't ask you for 50%. He asks you for 10%, right? For tithe and so forth. And so if you go and you take 10% and you pay to yourself, that's going to be an investment in your future. It's not taking everything. So very similar mantra. You want to invest at least small amounts towards your health future, right? So that means that your nutrition, that means towards your exercise, that means towards your sleep. All these things will help build you mold you into the person that God has for you, that spiritual life. All these things are extremely important. So as you begin and you say, you know what, I'm going to commit time towards this. I'll commit 10 minutes every single day. It's achievable of exercising. I'm going to commit to having a green leafy vegetable or some berries or some apples every single day, no matter what. I'm going to commit to having 50% of the liquids are going to be water, whatever it is, something achievable for you in every situation. That is a plan towards success that's practical, because you have to incorporate that into your life now to build the foundation for a healthy future. You're investing not for you right now at age 18. You're not investing for you right now at age 17. What you're doing right now is an investment for you at age 37, at age 47, at age 57, at 67, right? And these are the foundations of, just like inside archaeology, the civilizations that are built upon each other that are going to determine your future with God's blessings. And so that's where it starts. Plan, invest, execute today.
I would jump in and say, I'll give you 4 F's. We've already talked about food. We've talked about finances just now. I think that's very wise. I would say if you want low stress, spend less than you make. Very simple advice, but it actually works very well. And you'll have much less stress if every month you have some money left over, even after you've invested in yourself. So you budget so that you do it that way. The last 2 things I want to throw in, one of them is friends. When you come out of high school, who are you now going to associate with? You guys are coming out of an academy situation where most of the people around believed in God, even if they don't practice it, even if your friends are marginally Christian, there's some common understanding between your friend circle as to what you believe and do. You're going to, if you leave, especially if you go to a non-Christian higher education, and in some cases, even if you do, they're going to be folk who drink, smoke weed, watch pornography, things that maybe you've never been exposed to. Hopefully you've not been exposed to. You're going to have to pick the right friends. They say in Jamaica, if you lay with dog, you rise with fleas. And it's an important truth. If you show me who people hang with, I'll tell you exactly what they will become. Psychologists talk about the fact that just after 7 or 10 minutes, I forget what the exact number is, of being around someone else, you begin to take on some of their characteristics and traits. That's why who you hang with is going to be critical. Find the people in college who are going somewhere, who are serious about their education, and hang out with them, even if they're not the coolest, most popular people. You know what you learn 10 years at your first 10-year reunion of college? Just like high school, the people who are popular then aren't nearly as popular as the successful people 10 years later. The people, I'm sure Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Steve Jobs were not the most popular people in their high schools. They're popular now. And it's a matter of you aligning yourself with those individuals. Even further with friends, nothing will determine your long-term health, your long-term financial success, long-term spiritual success more than who you date and then marry. So the other piece of advice is do not allow romance to sidetrack your future. The last thing I would say is faith. Dr. Matisse very eloquently mentioned it already, but I have to say that one of the greatest threats to the church is that we lose so many of our young people once they get to college or get to college age. Many of them don't even go to college. Something happens after 18 where many of our young people fall along the wayside. In college, a lot of times, it's because if you go to, especially if you don't go to a good Adventist school, you're going to get theories and philosophies you've never heard and are unable to defend your viewpoint. Hold on to your faith. Find the resources to defend what you believe, because nothing keeps you as healthy as having a healthy faith in the Lord Jesus Christ.
I want to just add something in here. It's about our middle school students. Those, for public school, we have students being promoted from the 5th grade into the 6th grade because some middle schools start for 6th graders. Of course, our Adventist schools also are middle school, 6th through 8th grade. There's something that happens with their the chemical in their bodies during this time. Can you talk to that in terms of how it affects them and the type of mood swings they go in and out of? How can what they eat help with those different mood swings because of the chemical imbalance in their bodies?
I assume you're talking about puberty. Okay. Puberty is a natural thing. But it is a lot of hormonal change all at once. Mm-hmm. Let me say this. There's a whole lot. This, again, to Dr. Batisse's point on another question, we could do a whole session on just this. Mm-hmm. But let me say that one of the things that we found in America The average age of the onset of menarche, which is when a girl starts to have her monthly period, used to be 17, 18 years of age. And at those times, 100 years ago, the girl was usually married off before or shortly after that. So there was no gap in time between, a sexual life and puberty. It all kind of just flowed together. The average age of menarche in America now is 12. For Black girls, it's 9. Now, what that means is, you talk about hormonal imbalances, and
Right.
that means that at that early age, there is actual sexual desire, hormonally driven. Now you compound that with what you watch on television and the crooning music telling you to do all kinds of foolishness that comes out of the music industry, and you can see that there is a lot of change. So spiritually, emotionally, physically, there's a lot that happens because of that. Now, why is that happening? One of the reasons we know is leptin. We know that if you increase body fat, the leptin levels, which is a hormone released by fat cells, if it gets high early, girls go into puberty. So gymnasts and others that really stay fit at very low body fat percentages, they still have very late onset of menarche. Vegetarian girls, on average, one study I read, start menarche about 6 months later than a non-vegetarian counterpart. What we know is very dangerous to girls is actually dairy products, milk and cheese specifically. The lactose in milk breaks down to galactose and glucose. The galactose actually negatively affects the ovaries, causing increased PMS and painful periods that are less controlled, and probably long-term can even impact fertility. So we know that dairy products are one of the things that does that. And I could go on. Never mind the fact that, how do you get milk? Well, they impregnate a cow and then milk it while it's pregnant, which means the amount of actual estrogen in the milk is high. So what does that do to boys? And there are other food products that feminize boys. No one talks about this. Dr. Joel Furman, in one of his books, actually begins to discuss that if in the foods, based on the way foods is produced, it can feminize young men, like hormonally, and obviously hyperfeminize females, which can increase the risk for ovarian and breast cancer later on, and of course has other problems. So really, it goes back to what we said before. This is living the way God said live is what's best. Whole food, plant-based, faith-based. So you're not exposing a brain to all of these different things. All of these things are important. And as these 5th graders going into 6th grade, and many of them are going to start having these puberty changes, this is also important not to be exposed to things like marijuana, alcohol, even pornography. The studies on pornography show it increases the release of testosterone in boys, making it much more difficult for them to focus on schoolwork. They become hypersexualized. Also shrinks the frontal lobe of the brain, pornography. So you think about that for a second. Why is that important? I'll say this and then I'm going to let Dr. Batiste jump in. In the scripture, the frontal lobe of your brain is where the seal of the living God goes. It says you get it in your forehead. That's right here. It's also where the mark of the beast can be placed, but the mark of the beast can also be placed in your hand. The last chapter of Revelation says that is in the front, it's in the forehead that God writes his name on those who love him. What does the name represent? It's character. That means that when you're watching pornography, smoking weed, drinking alcohol, all these, and watching too much television, all these things that shrink the frontal lobe, you're literally removing the space where God is one day to write his name, and removing the place where the seal of the living God would one day be placed. This is how critical these things we discuss are for Christians, especially young Christians.
Yeah, not a lot to add. That was powerful. Just on a practical level for the kids out there who may be listening, is one of the things I know I've heard this term from my kids who are 16 and 14 right now. So they're inside this whole paradigm we've been discussing, is something called glow up. That kids talk about, they want to get their glow up and that they're going to transform and look pretty or handsome, all this other kind of business. And one of the things that kids don't like, and adults as well, is you don't like pimples. Don't like pimples, don't like zits or anything else like that. And we know that what happens with those, these are areas that had developed pus inside of it, this white creamy substance, and it becomes red. It might even become inflamed and hot, and it definitely hurts. And then all of a sudden it will burst and lead to an issue. And so we know that this is a manifestation, right? Of they learn that sugar plays a role in this. They learn that processed food plays a role in this. They learn that dirt plays a role in it. Well, the same thing happens on the inside of the body. This is one few instances in where the manifestation of this hormonal surge added on top of it by our nutrition can adversely affect the skin. The same thing can happen in your brain in terms of the inflammation that happens. That can impact your thinking process and your memory. The same thing can happen too as well inside your vessels and be the precursor for diseases. And so this is one example to the kids out there who may be listening of the importance of why dietary from a just soul health purpose is important, not just for the aesthetics of how you look, but also for the foundation of your future selves in terms of your mind and your body.
Thank you so much for taking on that area for me, because I know it's a challenge for middle school children. Sometimes they're wondering why they can't focus and so forth. And these are some of the reasons why. So thank you. Have you noticed changes or new trends during these past 15 months with COVID closures and people being more sedentary than before?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I think there are several articles written on the resurgence of some of these childhood treats. And this is more targeted at adults, that all of a sudden these foods you started going through when we were in the midst of COVID, maybe somewhere around this time last year, right? And so we were seeing stores were empty. Well, not all of the storefront was empty. A lot of the processed, highly refined foods and the meats were gone, but the vegetables were there, right? The people went back to those old childhood treats because the memory and the imprint, once again, of these foods that were given as a child came back, and you wanted that comfort. You wanted somehow to be comforted from the chaos that was surrounding you. And so we saw an upsurge in this. And people talked about now, and forget about the freshman 15 or the brand new marriage 15, the COVID 15, that people were putting on weight from this. So the combination from nutrition that as well as fear gripped the nation. And it kept people from really the majority from being active. We were told, hey, be careful going outside. Oh, hey, be careful, and all rightfully so, to distance ourselves. And so as a result, people became very sedentary and started creating these habits. It's easy somehow. It's always easy to do the things that aren't good for us. It's easy all of a sudden to go back eating poorly. It's easy to sit instead of get active. As Eric mentioned, that first mile is always challenging, right? So what's easier than that? Sitting down, that pleasure trap. Conserve energy, avoid pain, and seek pleasure. And that's what people did during that time, is they got caught up in the pleasure trap and no longer sought activity or healthful eating.
Nothing to add on that one. It definitely happened in the COVID. A lot of people just sat at home for the whole year and a half. We've been dealing with this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So then the follow-up question would be, as summer is rolling in now, we have, I was joking with Dr. Davis this morning, it's like COVID is gone in Florida. Everybody's out and about. What caution and maybe advice would you give to parents about continuing to promote physical, nutritional, and mental health for their children as we get back into our routines?
One of the advantages COVID did have is a lot of families spent more time together. People weren't traveling as much. People were working from home. Kids were going to school from home. And probably in the last year and a half, one of the biggest things that happened is a lot of people really found their families again. You didn't have to commute home, so people made dinner and sat and had dinner together. They spent time. I've talked to a lot of families whose worship life drastically increased because all of a sudden they were home and they had worship as a family every night and every morning even. My advice is to not give up the good things that you learned and experienced during COVID. spending more time with family, spending more time with your kids, spending more time in worship and in the word are the things that should be taken away from it. And there are some people who used it to their advantage for their health, but spiritually, I think we learned what's valuable. And I would say that if you really want to take something out of it, based, on top of all the things we said already, really remember how important it is to spend quality time with family.
Yeah, I would agree. I think as a nice dovetail from that as a foundation was beginning to be rebuilt in terms of this family dynamics that are there, being able now as a family unit, be able to incorporate more outdoor activities, right? As things in still a safe precautionary fashion, as well as eating habits too, as well, to say, okay, you know what, we're going to have picnics, we're going to go out to the beach, we're going to do this. And so let's include some healthy snacks, or hey, you get to choose the fruit today. Okay, hey, you get to choose what you want inside the salad. You get to make the salad, whatever you want inside of it. And so engage your kids and your family into this whole process. Tap into the things that they really enjoy, that they really like as it relates to those substances. And that is going to help bolster their mental health. And you tap into that, still continuing on with the spiritual aspect, if that's something that you've been able to really heighten during this time period. I think it's important to build and not negate it and say, okay, we're going back to the way things were, and you go out and hang out with your friends, you go out there, but we're going to continue this family dynamic, and let's see how we can incorporate these things to make us healthy for the future.
So, Dr. Baptiste, you kind of segue into the last and final question for us this evening. So as people are heading back and resuming what is previously normal activities for them, what are some of the ways or things they can do to stay healthy and to stay safe?
Yeah, just to add additionally to what I've said for all of us, I think one of the key things that when I encounter patients who've gone through heart attacks and they've unfortunately had to have open heart surgery or whatever it may be, there's a period of time that they're off from work. And I'll tell them this period of time isn't just for you to heal, it's for you to plan. As you see, planning is really important for me, because it's not so much about what you're going to do. I think it was Mike Tyson who said everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And so, yeah, you get back to the stressors of life, your boss yelling at you, stuck in traffic, having to rush back to pick the kids up. What are you going to do then? What's your plan? What's your foundation? What am I anticipating the worst case scenario, right? That's what I tell my patients. I want you to anticipate, as we plan out how you're going to be successful in this new lifestyle venture. I want you to plan when there's no food in the house, you're hungry, you don't feel like going out. What are you going to do in that particular instance? Are you going to order Uber Eats and get the most unhealthy food at that moment? How are you going to plan for the worst case scenario? Now solve for it. I want you to solve for that issue, solve for that moment, going back a little bit. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Walsh, because this wasn't exactly what you asked me, but I'm going to say it anyway, right? Plan for that situation for the high school graduates, and you're off to college and you're by yourself without parental oversight. And now you're encountering someone that you're interested in. What decision are you going to make in that moment of weakness? What decision are you going to make when you're offered something that that goes against your ethos and what you've been taught since childhood? You have to make a decision and a plan for the worst case scenario when you're most tempted in that particular moment. And the same goes for our lifestyle. Same goes for our spiritual life. Same goes for our eating and our activity as well. Plan.
I'll jump on the plan thing and just say, one of my favorite quotes I always tell young people is, nobody plans to fail. They simply fail to plan. So you got to have a plan. And I think as we go back out, I think people need to be careful. There are a lot of people who really want to rush back into what we used to do. I'm very worried. One of the things that hasn't been talked about much in the media is the fact that we actually are watching an epidemic of alcoholic diseases. A lot of people drank their way through this last 13, 14 months. The churches were closed, but the liquor stores were open. They were considered essential. In fact, these are some of the biggest profits alcohol has ever made. On top of that, they've legalized marijuana in many states. I don't think Florida has just yet. or Georgia, but
Sure.
New York and California, probably two most populous states in the union, have, along with a myriad of others. So we're going to start seeing some real things. As we go back into the real world, a lot of people are going to want to party and get loose. You got to stop. And to Dr. Batiste's point, ask yourself, how do you prepare for the next pandemic? How do you prepare for the next big global crisis? We know prophetically that what just happened is a blip. As big as the COVID thing seemed, when you study Matthew chapter 24, it's only mentioned in verse 7. There shall be famine and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. Verse 8 of Matthew 24, Jesus says, these are the beginning of sorrows. All that we just saw is a warning from God. Ask yourself and your family, are we ready for when the real time of trouble comes? Because verse 9 and 10 says, then shall they take you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you. It gets worse. So what are you doing now? And in the book of Jeremiah has a great saying where he says, if you couldn't run and keep up with the footmen, how will you keep up with the horses? If you were wearied in the land of peace where you dwell, how will you do at the swelling of the river Jordan? So if now we can't handle what's going on, how are we going to handle the spiritual things in front of us? And that's what I would leave with the students that are graduating or moving up into high school, from junior high school or middle school. How are you going to do? As time goes on, temptation is going to increase. Satan knows he has a short time, Revelation chapter 12. Are you prepared for that? And as we come out of this pandemic, it is not a license to go back to do what we used to do. It's an opportunity for us to rethink and reset, realign ourselves with our Lord Jesus Christ in all the different things we've been talking about. Because what has been told to us for sure in the last 13, 14 months is time on earth is short. Are you ready for Jesus to come?
Let the church say amen. That was, I couldn't ask for a better closing to what we are talking about today. However, I'm going to ask if there's any final word as we nourish the curious mind. We know we're talking about our children. Anything else that either of you would like to just talk to a parent or two about at this time?
I think we just have to maintain a community of prayer. I mean, I think we live in such challenging times right now, and our kids are facing something that is foreign to myself. It's foreign to me. It's not something I grew up with. It's not something I understand it, but that's as an outsider, not as a growing up in this era. And so we have to keep them in prayer that God will not only guide us in terms of the words and the way in which we impact them, but also guide their steps and their encounters and give them wisdom and judgment as we try and navigate this new journey for them, right? And this journey that's complicated by all of these landmines of social media and streaming and binge watching and voyeuristic society and anything goes. And, so that's what I would leave in encouragement. But, I think we have to hold true to faith, and what God has for us is the most important thing.
I think what I would leave the parents with is forgiveness and growth. If there's ever a time when we need to be parents who are not harsh and exacting and foreboding, it is now. That didn't work very well when I was a kid, honestly. The strictest parents lost their kids, if you know what I mean. Like, their kids left the church. The most abusive, rough, tough, restrictive parents, many of them, their kids just walked away from church. Those who parented on prestige and wanting everyone to see how special their kid was and how much better their kid was than everyone else, some of their kids turned out to be the biggest hellions when I was growing up. We need to parent from a place of forgiveness and growth. That means our kids are going to mess up. Never in Earth's history has it been more challenging to be a Holy Ghost-filled, sanctified, righteous child than it is today. Never in Earth's history. You can go back to Tyre and Sidon, Sodom and Gomorrah, Rome in its height of its filthiness. Nothing compares to what our kids have access to. A simple cell phone has more opportunity for your child to be corrupted than the entire theaters of the ancient Roman Empire. One cell phone. So we've got to have a spirit where we are nurturing and supporting our children, informing, educating, but loving them. They got to understand that our love is unconditional, so that if they get caught out there because of the way the world has become, they're not afraid to come back to us. Forgiveness. And parents, not just forgiveness of your child, but forgiveness of ourselves. Because many of us as parents look back and see where we failed as parents, and that can often stymie our ability to actually continue to direct our children. If you weren't a perfect parent, it's okay. It is okay. Even Mary told Jesus, turn water into wine. Jesus was like, basically said, this woman doesn't understand my mission. So forgive, because what we want ultimately is growth. A just man falls 7 times, rises every time. Parent from a position where you are going to love your child so much that they see God in you. And how much does God love us? He does not destroy us the first time we mess up. In fact, some of us have messed up 10,000 times, and he's still standing there waiting for us to get things together.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And again, to Dr. Batiste and Dr. Walsh, we know that with your practices, your schedule is busy, and we appreciate the time that you took to share with us today and to remind us just how good God is, and that we can always call on him to help us as we navigate life. We would like to thank you, our viewers, for joining us today, and hope that you were as blessed as Dr. Davis and I in the conversation that we had with Drs. Batiste and Dr. Walsh. You know that we can't wait to see you next week, God willing, for another segment of Education That Transforms. And just in case you forgot, we'll be waiting for you at 4 p.m. Today, though, we have a special program. This is our graduation, SEC graduation ceremony for our graduates. So please tune in, call the kids, call your family, share the link, subscribe, and let us congratulate and support our students, our children, in their accomplishments and endeavors. And for those of you that have graduated, may God bless you as you move on to this next level, this next journey in life. We know that he will do great things through you. Please join us now as we wrap up, and may God be with you all. Please stay safe, stay blessed, and have a great week.
Coronavirus. 5 things kids need to know. Number 1, wash your hands for 20 seconds. Sing a short song while you scrub. Number 2, visit your friends from home. Ask your parents about a play date using the phone or computer. Number 3, masks are safe, not scary. They help protect people from germs. Number 4, cover your cough or sneeze. Use your elbow or a tissue. Be sure to wash your hands too. Number 5, be a good helper. Don't forget to clean up after yourself. Remember, it's okay to ask questions. asking questions can help you feel better. Thanks for watching.